tonight I have the honor of having him in person. And we're going to be talking about his brand new book, Talk Triggers. All right, so therefore we encourage you to stay tuned for tonight's edition of Mind Your Business. We're going to talk about talk triggers and how you could use them to grow your business, how to turn your customers into volunteer marketers, and tips to easily scale your business by using word-of-mouth marketing. With that intro, we give a very warm welcome, Jay Baer. Jay, thank you for joining me here on Mind Your Business.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Fantastic to be back on the show. Thank you for having me. It's been great to work on this book with my friend Daniel Lemon, and big thanks to our mutual friend Shep Hyken for introducing us so long ago.
Well, I'm going to open with the foreword by Ted Wright.
Yeah.
And he says it, I'm just going to say it straight. Jay has the ability to convey complex concepts clearly while offering really practical action steps. We're all better off for it. I'm the one saying it, so talk triggers.
Well, I appreciate that. Ted's a good man. He wrote the foreword to the book. He wrote a terrific book about word of mouth called Fizz, and his agency is also called Fizz. Many of the great word of mouth success stories in this country were quietly produced by Ted Wright, including, you'll appreciate this, I don't know if you know this story. You know how Pabst Blue Ribbon is now like the hipster beer, right? Like everybody drinks PBR, sure. Yeah. So back in the day, it was just like a broke down brand, very, very low budget and very, very low sales. The Pabst Blue Ribbon Company hired Ted and his agency to change that. And over a period of years, through a lot of really interesting word of mouth and viral seeding kind of campaigns, they turned Pabst Blue Ribbon into sort of the hipster darling brand that it is today. And that was no accident. Ted was responsible for a lot of that.
So let's jump in. Talk triggers. What was the inflection point where you say, like, you know what? I got to write this book. I have a clear path. And by the way, this book, there is a clear path on how you can establish talk triggers for your business. It's all outlined. I went through most of it already. I am not ready for the test on it, but I went through most of it. And you could, those of you want to stop by and see my marked up copy. Yeah. I mean, it's the real thing. What's the backstory to it?
You know what's funny? I've actually been writing about talk triggers since 2011, and I would kind of come back to it, here and there. But I wrote this book for the same reason that I've written all 6 of my books, which is when I hear the same kind of question from my clients, from my customers over and over, I think, geez, if our customers, who are some of the most iconic brands in the world, don't know the answer, a lot of people don't know the answer. And what was happening is that our clients were saying, well, we feel like we've got a better handle now on the mechanics of social media or the mechanics of content marketing, but we're still not really sure what we should be saying. And I thought, geez, these big brands, what they don't have is a story. They don't really know what their own story is. And I thought, wow, here we are, 2017 at that point, and we don't actually know what story we're trying to tell. We have to fix that problem first and worry about social media second. And sort of the companion issue is that I find, and we talk about this in the book a little bit, that a lot of businesses feel like social media is word of mouth. And social media is word of mouth the same way that a tube of toothpaste is the same as the toothpaste inside the tube. It's not the same thing, right? Social media is a delivery mechanism for word of mouth, but it's not word of mouth. And so, you know what? Even though word of mouth has been around for literally hundreds of thousands of years, let's remember, word of mouth was the only marketing for a long time. Like when cavemen sold rocks to one another, that's like all they had, right? And then somebody like painted something on a cave wall, and they're like, oh, an outdoor board. But word of mouth has been the only marketing form forever. But even now, we still have a lot of trouble understanding how to do it on purpose. Everybody does word of mouth on accident, but nobody really does it on purpose. And so we set out to fix that with this book.
It's a great point you raise. A couple of months ago, we had Amanda Holmes, who, of course, is the daughter of Chet Holmes.
Yeah.
And Chet always writes in his book about, that he'll pose certain questions to his audience and be amazed how Fortune 500 companies sometimes won't have their narrative or their
It's amazing.
So the fact that you were asked that question so many times, and you say, but what's beautiful is how you turn that into the opportunity and say, I got to write this book because if everyone's asking the question, that means that they need the answers. Like, hello.
Well, and you mentioned this idea of this book having a system, and Ted talked about it in the foreword. That's really the key to this book, right? There are a number of good books on the market about word of mouth. Right. Ted's book, Fizz, is terrific. There's books by Jonah Berger. There's books by Andy Cernovitz, by by Emmanuel Rosen. There's a lot of great books about word of mouth on the market. You don't need a book from me and my friend Daniel to tell you that word of mouth is important. But what no book has really done historically is said, here's exactly how to do it. Like, here's a process and a formula and a strategy and a system that any business can use to get their customers talking. And that's really, I think, what we've contributed here is not just telling you it's important and why it's important, but, okay, great, now here's what to do about that. We trust each other, and the data backs us up. This isn't just me saying this. We trust each other more than ever.
Yeah.
And we trust businesses and organizations less than ever. In fact, the new research from Edelman Public Relations finds that trust in businesses and organizations has gone down 10 years in a row. And I don't care what business you're in, you can't change that.
Right.
That's a societal thing, right? That's not a you thing. So the more you can get your customers to talk about you, the more persuasive it is, the more effective it is. I mean, fundamentally, the best way to grow any business is for your customers to do the growing for you, and that's what we're trying to convey here.
You mentioned in the book, throughout the book, that the best way to grow business is to have your customers grow it for you.
Yeah.
Please elaborate.
Well, as we were just discussing, we don't trust institutions and companies as much as we used to. And there's a couple of things, right? So if your customers are telling your story, you don't have to pay for that. Now, look, advertising can be really effective, but advertising can also be pretty expensive. Right. It's pretty easy to waste money on advertising. And in social media today, all the social networks, all the social algorithms have said, we're going to over-prioritize content that is published by real people, and we're going to under-prioritize content published by businesses. Well, to me, that sounds like a recipe for word of mouth. If you can get real people talking, it sort of gets around those algorithmic penalties that have been applied to content published by businesses. So, there's tons and tons and tons of examples in the book of businesses that have really grown just through having a distinct word of mouth strategy. In fact, the research shows that between 50 and 91% of all purchases are influenced by word of mouth. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's half to 90% of all your money. Yet, here's the part that I find amazing.
Okay.
Nobody has a strategy. Like, you've got a strategy for everything. You've got a marketing strategy, you have a sales strategy, you have a social media strategy, a public relations strategy, a hiring strategy. You have a strategy for everything except for word of mouth, which may be more important than all of those things. We just take it for granted. We just assume that our customers will talk about us, and we assume that they will say consistent things about us. But why do we think that? Like, will they really do that? Is that really what happens in the real world? It's not. Right. So what we're trying to do is help businesses do word of mouth on purpose. Instead of what's happening today, where everybody's doing word of mouth on accident and hoping for the best.
So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Is there a hope for marketing firms?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what role is there for a marketing firm?
Because what's interesting about word of mouth is that even with a book like this that breaks down very specifically how to create a word of mouth strategy, a lot of business owners struggle with it because they can't find the story in their own operations. Because what is interesting to other people is not interesting to them because they're too close to it. Can I tell you a story about that?
Of course, please.
This isn't in the book. This goes way back. This is a story from 30 years ago.
Okay.
My very first job as a kid, I was a freshman, just out of my freshman year of university. I was an intern for a marketing agency in Phoenix, Arizona called Nelson Ralston Robb.
Okay.
And first week on the job, we went on a tour of a factory of a new client called Rockford Fosgate. And Rockford Fosgate was, and actually still is, a manufacturer of car stereo speakers and amplifiers and such. Their whole job is to make your car music louder,
okay,
or what have you.
Brooklyn got plenty of those.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know.
We're in Brooklyn.
We go on the factory tour, and it's me, my boss's boss, my boss's boss's boss. Right? I'm in charge of carrying briefcases. Okay. We're there with the marketing director from this company. And I remember quite clearly my boss's boss saying to her, before we begin the tour, just tell us, how is Rockford Fosgate different from your competitors who also make essentially the same equipment? Okay. She said, well, we make amplifiers in 5 different sizes. and our competitors only make them in 3. Okay. We'll begin the tour. And there's an assembly line, and at the very end of the assembly line, in the far corner, is a mountain of a man. He's 6'4", 6'5", 250, 260 pounds, long gray beard, long gray ponytail, wearing a white lab coat and carrying a giant rubber mallet. He was like a Hell's Angels, Top Chef, wizard kind of a mashup. He's the last station. And the amplifier comes down the line, and he grabs it and puts it on a sawhorse table type of a thing, takes the mallet and goes bam, 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 and bangs on the amplifier, and then plugs it in. And if the light turns green, he puts it in a box down the rolling conveyor belt. And so we're, across the factory floor, we're watching this wizard with the mallet and over. And we were all sort of just flummoxed. And we turned to the marketing director and we said, hey, is he always here? Or is it just agency day? And she said, no, that's Bob. He's our quality control process, because our customers are primarily young men and they drive their vehicles very aggressively. They hit curbs and they jump dips and things like that. And we want to make sure the connection to their amplifier stays tight, because if it doesn't, it's a terrible brand experience. You got to go underneath the carpet and plug it back in. Nobody wants to do that. So Bob is the mechanism by which we ensure that one key connection stays snug. And we asked her what was different, and she said 5 sizes versus 3. Meanwhile, you have Gandalf with a mallet on your factory floor.
He's your brand.
And now this is 30 years ago, and even back then, we knew a good story when we found one. And we convinced the company to allow us to do a whole campaign on this. Trade show booth, magazine ads, the whole thing. This is long before the internet.
Right.
And the headline was, Rockford Fosgate, if we can't whale it, we fail it. And it was just a picture of the actual guy with the actual mallet, and we just told the story, just like in narrative form. Right. If you've ever seen an ad for car stereo equipment, every single one of them is exactly the same. It's a picture of the product,
right,
and then 13 bullet points. That's it.
All features.
Right? All features. And it's like impedance and ohms and like all this other stuff.
Nothing about outcomes.
No story, no humanity, no personality whatsoever. And it was a massively successful initiative. The reason I tell you that story is that your question was, what's the role of marketing firms? That's their role. Because most business owners, even when you buy this book, it will be really hard for you to do it yourself because you're too close to it. Like, you don't see the gold in the river. And one of the things that agencies are really good at is finding the gold in the river, because they're not in the river every day.
It's a great point. Many times I'm sitting with an executive director of, let's say, a nonprofit. And in certain spaces, we have found that a print newsletter works well. So the executive director will say, you know what, I agree we need to do a print newsletter, but I don't know what to write about. And I'm like, wait a second. If you left it to me, I could put out a 48-page newsletter every month for you. As far as what to write about, you're just too close to it. Yeah. So you don't realize that there's so many great stories taking place right in front of your eyes. Yep. It's just that you're not attuned to it. But that's
it doesn't seem special to them because they're around it all the time.
See it.
Yep.
I love the honor of interviewing C-level executives and sharing their great advice and perspective on Mind Your Business. I'd love to get your feedback. Post it in the comments below and subscribe. You'll never miss an edition of Mind Your Business.